about promises and we know about REST APIs, let's look at some examples. So in JavaScript, we can use the fetch library to make simple API calls to endpoints. So in this case, we fetch this resource, which is this movies.json file. And essentially what we're trying to do here is we're trying to download this list of movies, which sits at this endpoint here. There it is. We can look at it right here. We want to download that into our app. And then we want to extract the JSON object, so the JavaScript object from it. And then we want to set our local state to the movies that we get back. And if at some point we error, we want to set an error using our local state once again. So fetch is that built-in JavaScript method that lets us make calls to fetch remote resources. This is something that can support GET requests, POST requests. You can pass in parameters. It has a lot of functionality, and it returns a promise. So that's why we use the .thens and the .catches. Movies.json is just a JSON file. If the promise resolves, we'll jump into this first .then method. So if it succeeds, we'll jump into this first .then method. And as you saw earlier, it takes a callback function. In this case, that callback function is essentially just converting the response to JSON. So it's extracting JSON from this response. And the JSON method is itself returning a promise. Now, because that returns a promise, we can use another .then on the value that we got back from here to get the actual JSON data. So this is an example of promise chaining, where we have multiple .thens in a row. And once we get that data, we can do whatever we want with it. And so in this case, we just set our local state to include that data. And thinking back to how React works, if we update this local state, it'll automatically re-render our component, and we'll see those list of movies. Now, if an error occurs in either one of these code blocks, so anywhere within these code blocks, our promise will jump into this catch block here, and it'll tell us exactly what error happened. So we can catch all of the errors that occur in this part of our code through this .catch block.